All right, thank y'all for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. I'd like to introduce you to the faculty that are in the exhibition tonight. We'll do it in reverse order with Lee Simmons, also known as DL. He is originally from South Carolina.
Right.
And he graduated, well, he didn't graduate, but he first went to the Memphis College of Art,
Right.
and I actually lived in Memphis for a few years, and we did
Same
know
time.
each other at the same time, but didn't know each other. And then he left there to go to Micah up in
Baltimore, Maryland.
Baltimore, Maryland. Got his BFA from there, and then went down to LSU
Right.
in Lafayette, right?
Baton Rouge.
Baton Rouge, I'm sorry. In Baton Rouge, and graduated from there with his MFA.
Right.
And then came back to South Carolina and worked his tail off for a few years.
I did.
Okay. Our second person for the night is Shannon Riddle. He's actually one of our own homegrown folks. He came from Macon originally and graduated from Macon State back in the 90s. And then he went on to UGA and got his undergraduate degree, BFA, if I'm not mistaken. And went on to get his MFA from Savannah College of Art and Design. And third on the plate for tonight is Ms. Terri Reckart, who works over in student success. Changed names on me. But student success, she's done an excellent job with us for years. Taught art to preach for us, different things over the years. So she originally graduated from Chattahoochee Valley Community College for an associate degree, I would take it, and then went on to Spring Hill College and graduated from there with BFA in art therapy, and then went on from Spring Hill to Pratt, still working in art therapy, and got a second BFA, I guess, in art therapy, I guess, or just art therapy, master's, okay, and then did all but dissertation at FSU for her art therapy. So, Florida State. So, go Seminoles, right? So, final, most of you know me. I'm Charlie Agnew, originally from Virginia. I graduated from Bluefield College with a BA in Fine Arts, with a concentration in drawing, really, probably from there. And I went on to the University of Memphis and got a MFA in painting in 1999, and taught for a few years there, and then taught for a few years at Union University, and then I've been here ever since. So, met Terri about 11 years ago, actually. She actually preceded me by at least by a year. Taught in a pinch. So, but we're going to talk to you about our artwork tonight. We're going to start out with Lee, and let him tell you a little bit about his prints here on this wall. So I'll turn the floor over to Lee and let him do a little talk.
All right. If you're interested, on the wall here is a series of prints. And printmaking is not a copy of something else. Traditional printmaking is actually, you make multiple originals. It's as if you paint a painting, and then while the paint's wet, you put paper against it and pull it off, and you go a couple times. That makes sense. It's a process to make an image. These are all fairly large prints. Most prints you'll see are 8 by 11, 11 by 17. They're about book size. So these are oversized. And there's a showing of pretty much every process that you would normally see in a studio. There's engraving, etching, digital imagery, photography, lithography, and silkscreen. And if you have questions about them, ask. If you ask about the materials or the images or what's happening, feel free to ask any questions. The two on the ends are some newer pieces, and the pieces in the center are a few older pieces. The three in the center are family members, and then I deal with the animal imagery, and then the patterning that I've been playing with recently. So if you have any questions, I'll open the floor for questions on the prints. And there are no questions. All right. Well, these are on paper, and they're each in a short edition of 5. There's only 5 of these exist of each image. A few of them, the one here, there's one in China. I just came back from China the year before last, and then the other ones are a couple of their collections. I've had work shown in a couple different places in the U.S., and then 2 of these, or the one on the end here, there was one that was in the same series that was at the Agnew in New Orleans a few years ago, which is a museum right out of downtown New Orleans. I was going to look at LSU, so we have a show down there, 30 years of printmaking at LSU. I guess I'll hand the floor over to Shannon Riddle, who has disappeared. There he is, hide behind me. Shannon is the painter who adorns the wall here on the rear. If you want to take a peek, and I will secede the floor to you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So these are all my paintings. They're all oil paintings. All of them, with the exception of the large one in the center, are on canvas. The one in the center is actually on masonite, so it's a little bit heavier. I like to deal with the theme of celebrities and how their images have been homogenized for us. And we look at them and we see them next to a picture of food in a magazine, or maybe a mugshot of somebody who did something that was terrible, but they're still famous. So all of the people that you see there are famous people. 2 of them are the same person. And then the 2 on the edges, one of them is of this little series I've started using dolls. I like nostalgia, and plastic products are interesting to me in childhood. I also like I like to make the figures a little bit confrontational. In other words, not necessarily welcoming to look at. But it's interesting. If pop art was about taking the humanity out of the celebrity and making them a product, then I like to think of my art sometimes when I'm painting celebrities is to remind ourselves that they're actually people just like us. So I try to make them look as much like I know them as possible. The one on the far right over there is actually a little Debbie cake that I crumbled up and just painted it from life. It was a grad school project I was working on. All right. Any questions for me? Yes.
How do you pick like the celebrity you're gonna draw?
I usually have to be a fan of that person unless somebody is hiring me to paint their favorite celebrity. I like to paint guys. A lot of my work deals kind of undertones with male identity and that kind of thing. But yeah, they're usually celebrities that I like, that I admire. The female here, that's Tilda Swinton, who was in the Narnia series as the White Witch. And somebody actually asked me to paint that for a show, so I had to go back and kind of familiarize myself with her. There's a whole process involved. Anybody else? All right, thank you. I'll turn it over.
Terry.
Terry.
My name's Terri. I'm also called Mama T on campus. My artwork's on the back wall and behind the door. My background is art therapy primarily, and I do a lot of work that relieves stress for me, that's fun, that's playful. My flowers seem to sell a lot in this area, and I think it's just because they're upbeat. Let's see. Like I said, I did work at Pratt. My undergraduate work was very intense, kind of political, and all of it is sold, or I would have put some in the show, but at the time, being in New York, people really enjoyed it, and I kind of miss it, but like I said, it's already gone. Let's see, what else? They're all acrylic, they're on canvas. I like to sculpt. I use soapstone, clay, limestone. I enjoy getting my knuckles hurt. It's kind of like you put all your anguish and everything into the work, and before you know it, the form comes to life. I enjoy that part of it. I also, like I said, I create just to make myself feel better. I'm ADHD, and I'm not good about painting the sides of the canvas. I know Mr. Agnew tells you all to go ahead and do the side of the canvas. I don't do it. I have to hurry up and get the image outside of myself. What else? Any questions? Short and sweet. Any questions? Yes.
So for like the swirls on the canvas, did you also use acrylic?
It is acrylic and the other one's puffy paint, and sometimes I use jewels. I like mixed media. I had a friend at the Jesuit college I went to, and he was blind. And when he would come to my studio, I'd always say, Greg, do you see what I'm talking about? And it was, yeah. And so he could see, and I wanted him to understand what I was talking about, and I was like, there has to be something else to engage the viewer. And so, and I also, it's just one more way of creating that form, encapsulating the form and the colors.
Any other questions for Mama T? All right. This piece right here is basically called Impressions of a Tree. It originally kind of started out of this piece right here in the middle. It goes back to my childhood, I guess you would say. I used to play under the trees a lot as a kid. We lived out in the rural area after I left Virginia Beach. It made a big impression on me. And so I would go out and play for hours in the trees, and we would play army and all kinds of stuff out in the woods, set traps, build forts, that kind of things. And so when I got older, I went back to those same trees when I went home to visit, and I got pieces of bark off of those trees, and I came in and covered basically these forms with impressions of bark that I would dip into different colored inks and build up layers and layers to give you kind of, because bark itself is layers and layers of wood, and so I just built it up. The tree, the sections themselves, if you're wondering why, why all the little boxes, they were actually based off of a sketchbook that I had at that time, and everything was a variation off of that size. It'd be half as thick. The thickness also kind of played off of these, 2 thick, 3 thick. With these, just the shape, of course, the flatness of it. So I was trying to play the idea of a 2D nature of artwork versus the 3D nature of artwork. And then also the idea that even though, I love trees and things like that, they've been homogenized for us, I guess you would say, in a way. They're not really the trees like when we came over 200 years ago, 250 years ago. Trees have been shaped by us. They're not, not that they're not real anymore, but they're shaped by man. They're not as natural as they used to be. We trim them. You've seen all those weird trees that are around power lines. We place them where we want to. We kind of, they're kind of like the little bonsai trees. We shape them right and so this is the idea that trees are not natural anymore, that we kind of shape them the way that we want them to be shaped. The pieces at the top are from a similar series. I just continue with kind of as a large environment piece. So I just called the whole thing Impressions of a Tree. But they were out of a very large tree. They were rubbings. I started out as charcoal rubbings. And the tree was probably, 250, 300 years old. It was bigger around. I couldn't even get my hands around it. And I spent probably 2 days out there rubbing at the tree. I had this really big piece of charcoal that I had gotten from a store, and I never figured out what to do with it. And so I took it out there with all the paper I had cut up, and I just rubbed all the pieces of paper with the charcoal, and then I would tack them to the tree, and then I would go back. And I had artist quality crayons, not the little kids crayons, but they really had good pigments in them. And I would rub all and get nice impressions from the wax on the paper. And I did that probably for 2 days, and there was a little bird that sat up in the tree that was really irritated with me, along with probably some squirrels too. But I know the bird because it would make these chirping sounds, and then it would drop little pebbles and acorns down at me on my head, trying to get rid of me, because I guess I was shaking the tree while I was doing all that stuff, and it really got irritated with me that day. And then after that, I took them back into the studio and I worked on them some more. I also make my brushes, at least while I was doing a lot of this stuff, I was making my own brushes out of leaves and pine needles and things of that nature. And so these, the long marks that you see in these were made from pine needle brushes that I made myself, that I would dip into the similar inks to these, except, of course, I'm getting this nice long motion. The idea was that you could kind of get the idea of again, a trunk of a tree, and that's what these are. They're kind of like, these two are trunks of trees, and these were kind of like sections out of the trunks of trees and again, kind of dealing with the idea that things are, not as natural as they used to be, but I also like the idea that these are kind of in-your-face parts of nature. Because generally, we look at nature from back, we always think about the vista and the nice little mountain. But I remember as a kid, just like being in the middle of it. And so that's what I'm kind of wanting to share with you, is kind of the idea that it's nature in your face. Take a look at it. Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Out of these two, the 2D and 3D, which one would you say was harder to draw?
This was probably the harder piece of the two, simply because I had to make all the little darn boxes. Because I had to nail them together and sand them and spackle them and gesso them and put the layers of ink on them. And since it had the gesso on that particular, the ink doesn't, if you'll notice, it looks a little different than the other. It dried a little different, so it took longer to dry. So it was a harder process trying to figure that out. And I did this, actually I did another series with this as well, which was more successful, I think, than these. I actually went back and I built all the boxes out of polystyrene foam, glued it together, and then wrapped it with either linen or canvas or burlap. And then I went back with more bark from some trees that I had been around and did layers, and then I made half sizes and triple sizes, and it was like basically like a little small grove of trees on the later portion. So I would say probably that was the more labor intensive of the two. Although I think I probably enjoyed this one more because it did more. It reacted more the way I wanted it to. But this was kind of like a learning process. I was kind of learning how to deal with the paint and the ink. So having not mixed those two before, I guess that instance, I guess you would say. So yes, ma'am.
What did you make the paintbrushes out of?
The paintbrushes themselves were made out of pine needles for the ones on the top. Sometimes I also, not with that series, but I also will make my brushes out of like pin oak leaves, like the little oak trees that have the really narrow leaves that are about the size of your finger, because they're narrow and they give you a nice patterning, and they're not like the really wide leaves that splatter everywhere, and they'll give you good impressions of them. So I can control those a little bit better, that was why. So that's a good question. Any other questions? We will all be around tonight if you want to talk to us a little bit more. We appreciate you all coming out tonight. It's a great turnout. We really appreciate it. Most importantly, if you're in our classes, make sure you sign the book. I will put it out here in just a second. So thank you. Everybody, give everybody else a hand.